In the heart of Africa, amidst the sweeping plains and the towering baobab trees, a revolutionary spirit was born. Welcome to Afriverse, as we go through the life of one of Africa's most enigmatic and inspiring leaders, a man whose vision continues to burn brightly in Africa today. From his meteoric rise to power to his tragic, untimely end, Thomas Sankara's story is one of courage, conviction, and unyielding determination. Join us as we delve into the life of this remarkable revolutionary, exploring his ideas, his struggles, and his enduring legacy. Do stay tuned and enjoy the ride. Thomas Isidore Noel Sankara was born on December 21, 1949, in the town of Yako in Upper Volta, as the third of 10 children to Joseph and Marguerite Sankara. At the time, Upper Volta was a French colony, and his father was a member of the Gendarmerie. The Gendarmerie was a military force tasked with law enforcement duties among civilian population. His father was one of the few Africans employed by the colonial government. As such, he and his family had privileges that the vast majority of the people did not. Thomas Sankara was a studious and smart boy who was particularly good in mathematics and French. At that time, his father was a Roman Catholic by affiliation and wanted him to become a priest. But Thomas Sankara turned this down. He decided to join the army, which was a popular decision among his peers at the time. In 1966, at the age of 17, Thomas Sankara entered the military academy in the capital of Ouagadougou. While he was there, Sankara witnessed the first military coup d'etat in Upper Volta, led by Lieutenant Colonel Sangoule Lamizana. The academy had many civilian professors trained in social sciences, and Thomas Sankara was exposed to many ideologies such as anti-colonialism, anti-imperialism, and Marxism, which later profoundly influenced his political views for the rest of his life. He was also educated in socialist and liberation movements. After 3 years, Sankara left Ouagadougou and received further military training in Madagascar, where he also learned a great deal about agriculture. While in Madagascar, he witnessed popular uprisings against the government of President Philbert Tsiranana. In 1972, Sankara returned to Upper Volta and took part in a border war between Upper Volta and Mali. He distinguished himself in this conflict, although he would later describe the war as useless and unjust. In Ouagadougou, he became an immensely popular figure as a guitarist for a band called Tout Akup Jazz. Despite his success as a musician, he continued with his military career. In 1976, he became the commander of a commando training center in the city of Po, in the south of the country. In the same year, he became part of a secret organization called Communist Officers Group, which included famous members like Blaise Compaoré, Henri Zongo, Jean-Baptiste Bakore Lingani, and a host of others. In 1981, Thomas Sankara received his first position in the government as Minister of Information under President Saye Zebo's military government. During his time in the government, he was appalled by the excesses of other ministers and distanced himself as much as possible from them. While others drove to work in expensive cars, Sankara rode a bicycle. While others sought to censor the media, Sankara was open and honest, which will lead to government scandals. Veritably, he was disliked by his colleagues, and he resigned in April 1982. Later that year, another coup propelled Major Dr. Jean-Baptiste Ouedraogo to power. He appointed Thomas Sankara as his prime minister. Despite the change in government, Sankara gained the ear of his colleagues to push for progressive reforms. This proved a fatal mistake for the sitting government, as Sankara had developed considerable support within the army, and his imprisonment provided significant momentum for his fellow officer Blaise Compaoré to lead a coup and depose the government of Jean-Baptiste Ouedraogo. The coup d'etat was supported by Libya, which was at the time on the verge of a civil war with France in Chad. On August 4, 1983, Thomas Sankara was made president at the age of 33. Thomas Sankara saw himself as a revolutionary in the same vein as Che Guevara, Fidel Castro, and Ghana's military president, Jerry Rawlings. He was devoted to anti-imperialism, which sent red flags waving throughout the Western world. However, his policies were not geared towards fighting external factors, but focused on his own country's problems. His platform focused heavily on dealing with the corruption. Sankara was also sold on the benefits of reforestation, which became a major policy of his government. Thomas Sankara renamed the country Burkina Faso, which means Land of Upright People in the languages of More and Douala, two of the country's major languages. He also changed the country's flag and implemented a new national anthem. His first policy as president was to improve the lives of the people of Burkina Faso. He implemented policies that provided housing, feeding, and general health care for the people of Burkina Faso, which in turn drastically reduced poverty rates in Burkina Faso. He initiated a nationwide literacy campaign, increasing the literacy rate from 13% in 1983 to 73% in 1987. He forced civil servants to pay 1 month's salary to public projects, and he often refused to use the air conditioner in his office on the grounds that such luxury was not available to everyone but a handful of Burkinabés. Vaccination drives saw meningitis, polio, and measles tackled. From 1983 to 1985, 2 million plus Burkinabé were vaccinated. This represented over a quarter of the entire population. Sankara's government was also the first African country to recognize the AIDS pandemic. Housing was a priority, and brick factories were set up in an attempt to eradicate the large slums that were present in the country. A vast rail and road network soon connected all parts of the country, and 10 million trees were planted to curb deforestation. All this was done without foreign aid. Thomas Sankara was arguably the first African leader to put such a high priority on ecology, especially at a time when it was not seen as a major factor affecting the world. Sankara introduced laws that punished those for starting bushfires, letting their cattle roam, and illegally cutting firewood. As president, he required civil servants to wear a traditional tunic worn from the Burkinabe cloth and sewn by Burkinabe craftsmen, the reason being to rely on local industry and identity rather than foreign industry and identity. When asked why he didn't want his portrait hung in public places, as was a norm for other African leaders, Sankara replied, "There are 7 million Thomas Sankaras." One of the priorities of Thomas Sankara's regime was to improve the situation of women across the country, including equal rights. Gender mutilation, polygamy, and forced marriage were the first casualties of this policy and were banned outrightly. Many women were given positions of power within the government and the military, which was more unprecedented in any African country at the time. Sankara gave speeches and suggested that men try to do the labor that women were expected to do in order for men to understand better the position of women in the society. All this he achieved within 4 years and 2 months of his administration. In truth, not all Thomas Sankara's policies were successful. For instance, he instituted the Committees of Defense of Revolutionary, the CDRs, which were little more than armed militias tasked at spreading revolutionary thought and protecting the government. These armed groups were also seen as a counter to the power wielded by the armed forces. The CDRs ended up abusing their power, and acts of thuggery became a commonplace. Thomas Sankara admitted that this policy had been a failure. A system of courts, known as the Popular Revolutionary Tribunals, was created as a way to publicly display the government's attention to justice. Corrupt officials and those suspected of tax evasion were the first to be targeted. Sentences were light, but the defendants were not given the right to counsel, and the trials became a way for officials to be publicly humiliated by their rivals. Workers were put on trial for laziness and sentenced to work for free, while other powerful officials created their own courts. Sankara's insistence on equality also put his government at odds with the significant large multi-ethnic group, which had a strict hierarchical social structure. This structure was seen as an obstacle to the creation of unity and equality within the country, and many of the Morsi elites were stripped of their privileges. In addition to these unsuccessful policies, in December 1985, Burkina Faso and Mali fought a war over the disputed Agacha Strip, a small piece of land on the border between the two countries. After 5 days of fighting and the death of over 150 people, the strip was partitioned. During his tenure as president, Thomas Sankara's leftist policies saw the country shift its foreign relations away from the Western powers and more towards the communist and left-leaning administrations. Of particular note was the relationship developed between Burkina Faso and Cuba. After Thomas Sankara met with Fidel Castro, hundreds of Burkinabe children were flown to Cuba to be trained as doctors, engineers, and agronomists. For Thomas Sankara, politics was praxis. He prioritized the politicization of non-elites and non-separatists in a determination to do, make, and effect social change. As he reminded the audience during one speech, "What is left for us to do is to make the revolution." Revolution for Thomas Sankara was more than a passing revolt or a simple brush fire. Rather, the political economy of Burkina needed to be replaced forever with the revolution, the permanent struggle against all forms of domination. His praxis was deeply populist. Sankara's political philosophy shows an undaunted attention to the grassroots, saying that singers, dancers, and musicians can equally stand with former representatives of the Revolutionary Party to explain what the revolution would be. Sankara understood his role as that of a crucial pacemaker. He sought to create the social, economic, and political conditions for well-being, integrity, and empowerment, with understanding that these are not material goods to be given or passed around. His revolutionary orientation was founded upon the insistence that all Burkinabe be free and empowered, but that genuine self-employment was something to be cultivated through hard work and seized through struggle rather than allotted by the government or given through international aid. If you have made it this far, it means you must be enjoying this content. Please take out some time to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Guys, don't forget, subscription is free, so smash that button. Now let's get back to the video. He rejected the premise of aid for victimizing the people of Burkina Faso, as well as for stripping them of agency. This stripping of agency occurred on multiple levels. It was both intellectual, through the insinuation that local solutions were unlikely. This was a form of mental colonization, as well as tangible through the suppression of an environment in which people's own creativity could lead to innovative responses to local dilemmas. Addressing the United Nations General Assembly in New York on 4th October 1984, Sankara identified ignorance, hunger, and thirst as equally important for the aspirations of revolution. His role, as he articulated it, was to be sent in place of the economic, political, and social structures that allow all Burkinabe to pursue their own dignity, knowledge, and well-being. Our economic aspirations is to create a situation where every Burkinabe can at least use their brain and their hands to invent and create enough to ensure him 2 meals a day and drinking water. In this project of dignity and liberation, he recognized his limitations and challenges. Again, this approach reflected his humble but urgent approach to politics. On the topic of women's liberation, he said, "We are ready to welcome suggestions from anywhere in the world that will enable us to achieve the total fulfillment of Burkinabe women. Freedom can only be won through struggle, and we call on all our sisters of all races to go on the offensive to conquer their rights." While working to foster growth in national pride, creativity, and self-sufficiency, Sankara confronted the material conditions of poverty, in which was one of the world's most impoverished countries. In order to embark upon a series of ambitious nationwide health, sanitation, and environmental initiatives, the government required funds. To raise these funds, Sankara insisted that the people make material sacrifices, particularly government officials and members of the upper petty bourgeoisie. As president, he will share rations with his troops, as his chauffeur, Sidibe Alassane, recalled in an interview in 2017. Some displays of this sort of radical, humble, and down-to-earth living were not well received by all government officials. After one particular meeting, Sankara announced to his ministers that they would go and eat lunch together at a nearby restaurant. The group applauded in an apparent pleasure until he named the restaurant Idigri, a restaurant serving mostly low-income clientele along Yalgado Hospital. After lunch, Sankara announced that each minister would pay their own bills, along with the bills of their chauffeurs. The event was intended to be a lesson of collectivism and unpretentiousness and generosity, all pillars of Sankara's political praxis. But not everyone welcomed or appreciated these public effacements of social privilege. Thomas Sankara won widespread support because of the way he presented himself. He showed solidarity with the people of his country by denying himself the luxuries that were generally afforded to the government ministers. He sold the government fleet of Mercedes and replaced it with Renault 5, the cheapest car available in Burkina Faso. He also refused to use the air conditioning in his office on the grounds that it was unnecessary luxury that wasn't available to the Burkinabe people. He promoted an image of humility and was seen as a humble man. He was against his own portrait being used to decorate walls and public buildings. However, some journalists and academics have suggested that at least some of his radical, humble lifestyles was a ruse. Others have characterized him as manipulative in working to appeal to the popular base. What none of these examinations provide, however, is any indication of what ulterior motive would have promoted Sankara to orchestrate such a persona. This is particularly so considering that he actively worked against his own enrichment, both in and out of the public eye. On October 15, 1987, Thomas Sankara was assassinated along 12 others by a group of armed men during a coup organized by his former friend Blaise Compaoré, who then ruled the country for another 27 years. Compaoré reversed virtually all of Sankara's progressive policies and aligned Burkina Faso with the West. Compaoré was ousted in 2014 and tried in absentia in 2021. In April 2022, he was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment, although he is unlikely to ever serve his time. He currently lives in Ivory Coast with his family. The trial also shed a light on the fact that Ivory Coast France, the United States, and possibly Liberian mercenaries who were trained in Libya were involved in the assassination, although no damning evidence has been received, as the French government has refused to release all necessary documents. There were some who believed that one of Africa's most brutal dictators, Charles Taylor, was involved. According to Tar, in 1987, Taylor approached the Burkinabe embassy in Accra to ask for assistance in the overthrow of Dou regime in Liberia. The Burkinabe ambassador to Ghana, Madame Mamouna Ouattara, a Compaoré loyalist, appeared to have solicited Compaoré's assistance in getting the Ghanaian authorities to release Taylor into Burkinabe custody. This was facilitated by the fact that Ghana neither wanted to hand Taylor over to the Americans nor to Dou. Rawlings apparently released him to Compaoré, who had come to Accra as part of a mediation process Rawlings has undertaken to resolve the mounting disagreements between Sankara and Compaoré. Tar notes that not long after Taylor was delivered to Compaoré, Sankara was murdered. In exchange for Taylor's assistance in carrying out Sankara's assassination, Tar suggests that Compaoré provided assistance to Taylor, who was in the process of organizing the guerrilla warfare that would eventually lead to the overthrow of the Samuel Doe regime. Crucially, Compaoré is believed to have introduced Taylor to Libyan President Muammar Gaddafi. Taylor and his recruits subsequently traveled to Libya, where they underwent guerrilla training and formed a strategic alliance with Gaddafi, who supported his desire to overthrow the Doe regime. However, this version of events have been called into question. Ghanaian political scientist Eboe Hodgeful, who served as the executive director of the Accra-based NGO, African Security Dialogue and Research, has suggested that his Ghanaian informant disputes the idea that Ghana released Taylor to Compaoré. Rather, they contend that he was taken to the Ivorian border and released there. From Ivory Coast, he is said to have made his way to Burkina Faso, where the Libyans introduced him to Compaoré, rather than the other way around. Moreover, Hodgeful suggests that Sankara may have already been killed by the time the Ghanaian authorities released Taylor. When his autopsy was finally released to the public in October 2015, it revealed that his body has been riddled with bullet holes, including one just under his armpit. He was killed with his arms in the air. The autopsy confirmed what Haruna Traoré, the other living survivor of the assassination, had long maintained. Sankara went peacefully and knowingly to his death. This was a darkly humorous title, one that reveals his awareness of the probability of his premature death, as well as his absence of fear in regards of it. At the 2021 trial, the prosecution said Sankara was lured to his death at a meeting of the ruling National Revolutionary Council. He was shot in the chest at least 7 times, according to ballistic experts who testified during the trials. Sankara understood the immensities and dangers of the revolutionary project before him. He knew he would be perceived as a madman for fighting against the powerful global and regional economic elite. During his life, Sankara spoke often about radical black leaders who have been assassinated all around him, Maurice Bishop among them. Although he was only 33 years old when he became president, he referred to his wife as La Veuve, which translates to the widow. This was a darkly humorous title, one that reveals his awareness of the probability of his premature death, as well as his absence of fear in regards of it. At the time of his death, Sankara owned little and was quite possibly one of the poorest heads of state in the world. Amongst his possessions at the time of his death was 4 bicycles, a car, 3 guitars, and a refrigerator. Take on the other hand Blaise Compaoré, who according to one account has an estimated worth of $275 million. Thomas Sankara fought for equality in a time and place where inequality was rife. He was a champion of the working class and poverty-stricken masses. Today, he is an icon of the left-wing movement and is seen as Africa's Che Guevara. With media attention on his trial in recent years, his popularity has gained even more international attention, and his fame has spread throughout the world. What do you guys think about the life of Thomas Sankara, his good deeds for his people, and how his life was cut short by his friend and the army? Leave your comments down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It's been Nnamdi from Afriverse. See you in the next video.